So do you always wonder, Jonathan, how do I create content on a regular basis, like blog posts, podcasts, videos? And it's this constant hamster wheel of creating content. And I just can't keep up with how to create topics. I just wish there was a template. Well, the good news is there is a template. In fact, I'm going to share with you my 3 favorite content templates that you can use over and over again to create articles, blog posts, podcasts, and even YouTube videos. Let's get started. Hey messengers, welcome to the Market Your Message show. I'm Jonathan Milligan, an author of the book Your Message Matters: How to Rise Above the Noise and Get Paid for What You Know. And in today's session, we're going to talk all about content. Now, many of you know that creating content can be a powerful client attraction tool. It's a great way to draw an audience, especially for influencers. If you want to write, speak, teach, or coach, but you're tired or just don't enjoy promoting yourself, then your best bet is to promote your content. But how do you create content on a consistent basis to build a following, right? That's what I get. I get that question a lot. But I want to share with you today my 3 favorite content templates. Now, before we get into that, let me tell you a story. It was back in college, and I was studying, I was going to classes, I was going through, what we all do, or we're just trying to survive college, right? And then I took a class called homiletics. Now, homiletics is essentially about the art of persuasive speaking. How do you get up in front of an audience and persuade them? How do you create a good speech or a piece of content? Well, as the years went by, I came across blogging. And when I started blogging, I found it was incredibly difficult. It was hard because every week, and back then I was actually trying to blog 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I found myself like staring at the blank page. You ever been there where it's like, I don't know what to say. I can't think. And so you know what I did? I went back to my old classes, my old textbooks, my old notes from college. And I opened up homiletics and I looked at the homiletics book and I said, there's got to be something here. I remember putting together speeches that would help me, what's the big idea you're trying to get across? How do you create the subpoints to support your main idea? And I was searching for a template. I desperately wanted a template. And that's when I saw something in this homiletics book that was like a game changer for me. And I want to share with you some of the same templates that I have used now for 11 years. I have used 3 templates and have probably created well over 2,000 blog posts, probably well over several hundred podcast episodes, countless number of videos, and they can all be pointed back to 3 content templates. That's how useful these content templates are. They can be used and reused and reused and reused. And it's amazing how they work. So you ready? You ready to learn these? Well, here's what you're going to discover in our episode today. I'm going to talk to you about how to harness the power of stories in your content. I'm also going to talk about the encourage, educate, and empower content templates, and I'm going to define those. And I'm going to talk about the number 1 biggest mistake most people make with free content. Now, if you're watching this or listening and wondering, where do I get started, Jonathan? I don't even know where to start. The best place to start, if you desire to become an influencer or a communicator online, if you want to write, teach, speak, coach, podcast, do YouTube videos, the best place to get started is with our Discover Your Message Blueprint. Just go to marketyourmessage.com/discover and download this free 9-page guide to help you get started. All right, so what is the easiest way to remember these 3 templates? Well, I like to use a simple 3 words that all begin with the letter E to help me to remember it. And then I'm going to walk through each of these with you, and here they are. Encourage, educate, and empower. And this works across industries. It doesn't matter who your audience is. You need to be thinking about my content that I create, whether it's written, whether it is audio like a podcast, or it's video where people are watching you. The three ways that you influence people is to either encourage them, to educate them, or to empower them. And each of these, for me, represent one of my content templates that I want to share with you today. So let's jump in. Point number one, or I would call it template number one, is to encourage your audience through stories. Encourage your audience through stories. Have you ever noticed how powerful stories are? Stories can be an incredible way to grab people's attention. I led this little episode with a story. I talked about my college days. It brings people in. It gives them a better understanding. I had a professor once that said stories or illustrations are like windows that let the light in. And that's what we need to be doing, is opening windows that let light into people to help them and encourage them. So in my book, Your Message Matters, I talked about this story template that I use. That I'm going to show you exactly how I use it in just a second. But before I do, I want to talk to you about a book that I read that's all about leading with stories. And in the book, it talks about 10 compelling reasons to tell stories. And here they are. Storytelling is simple, right? It's timeless. It's demographic proof. Storytelling is contagious. It's easy to remember stories. It's inspirational. It's ideal for all types of learners. It's ideal for situations. In fact, all situations, whether you're in a work environment or a boardroom, or you're in a classroom of elementary students. It's a way to put the listener in a mental learning mode. And it also shows respect for the audience. The truth is, stories are incredibly powerful, but how do we use them to help our audience? Because it's not just about telling a story, but where we're leading our audience. And that's why I want to share with you this first template. So this is what I call the story content template. So at the top, you want to have your catchy headline, whatever that is, right? So I'm assuming you've got a catchy headline to your article, your podcast, your video. That's so important. And then you want to open up the content by sharing your funny or interesting story in detail. Now, if we're writing this, it might be 2 to 4 paragraphs long. It could be longer. You want to make sure you stick to the story and not do what's called spaghettiing, where you spaghetti or weave into multiple stories. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and they start a story and then they go to another story and another story? Don't create the spaghetti syndrome. Stick with your story. But then what you want to do to make the story useful is to think about 1 to 3 lessons from that story. It's got to connect back to your audience, right? Because the truth is, no one cares about your blog unless it's meaningful to them in some way. No one cares about your podcast or your YouTube channel if you're just talking about yourself. It's got to apply to them in some meaningful way. And we do that by putting in lessons. So then you state the first lesson. Here's the first lesson I learned from this story. Here's lesson number 2 from this story that you can use to apply to your own life. And here's lesson number 3. And then add a conclusion paragraph. You're done. It's that simple. So think about stories from your past and your childhood, stories when you were in college, stories in your early family days and your middle age days and your late adult days. We all have stories that we can use to apply them. In fact, when I was writing this book, it pushed me to look for story after story after story. And those of you who maybe had a chance to read the book, you'll see that every chapter opens up with a story. Sometimes there's stories in the middle of the chapter, and sometimes I go back to the original story at the end of the chapter. Stories are useful, highly useful in helping us with attracting an audience and with teaching. It can be an incredible tool to encourage people. So that is template number one, is it's all about encouraging your audience through stories. Here's template number two, educate your audience through instructional content. Now, not only do we want to use stories to encourage people, but we want to use good, solid how-to information to actually educate people, to educate our audience. Sometimes we forget that some people are at the beginning stage. Some people come into our world and they know nothing about our subject matter. We need to have the how-to content. People are searching for how-to content. People are showing up to Google. They're showing up to YouTube and they're typing in how to and fill in the blank. This is a great way to get discovered as an influencer by creating how-to content. So how do we do it? What's the template for us to use? Well, this is a go-to template that I've used over and over again. I call it the How Content Template. Again, very formulaic and very simple, but here's what you do. You have a catchy headline. Now, I'll keep it easy for this one. This one should be something like how to fill in the blank, whatever that is, right? How to launch a membership site in 4 steps. How to start a blog from scratch. Just enter anything after how to. And then we want to open up that blog post or that podcast or that video with maybe a question, a statement, a short story, or an illustration. Those are some of my go-to. Just open up that paragraph, right? Now, sometimes you can actually go back to the introduction later if you're writing out an article or a blog post, and you can actually start by just creating the outline first. So typically what I'll do is I'll choose the topic, how to launch a membership site in 4 simple steps, and then I'll go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then it's all about just filling in the details. What's a story or a statement or an illustration or a question I can start with, and then writing 1 or 2 paragraphs for each of the steps. And once I do, guess what? Boom, blog post in 45 to 60 minutes, it's done. It could also be a podcast. It could be YouTube video. It could even be live stream. It's really that simple. It's about understanding what you're trying to accomplish. In this case, we're trying to educate. And then we're just trying to figure out what are the 3 to 5 steps. What is the steps? In fact, the best way to do this is by actually starting with the preposition by, B-Y. So how do I launch a membership site? By picking the right tool, by understanding the right promotion strategy. Just use the preposition by. So that's the pro tip. If you're going to go the how route and you're asking the question how, figure out your steps by asking by, right? So if it's how to start a car for someone who's 15 years old and they just got their driver's permit. Well, it's by unlocking the door. It's by putting the key into the ignition. It's by turning the ignition. Now, obviously, that's an oversimplistic example, but do you get the point? You just got to use the preposition by, which leads me to the third template. And the third template is this: empower your audience through inspirational content. Empower your audience through inspirational content. Now, the question we want to ask here is why? In fact, I almost picture, whenever I'm creating content, I picture my audience, my ideal audience with their arms crossed, sitting back, a little bit skeptical. So for example, one that I've created in the past are 5 powerful reasons why you should write a Kindle book, why you should publish a Kindle book. And so the reasons are listed, right? The reasons, boom, 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 boom. Because of the amazing statistics that are about Amazon.com, right? Or because you'll be a recognized authority. Because you can build your list off of Amazon Kindle books because. And by the way, that's the pro tip here, is use the word because. So you are influencing someone with using this strategy of trying to empower them. So let's look closer at the template and maybe this will make a little bit more sense. So the why content template is you're going to have a catchy headline, 5 powerful reasons why you should publish a Kindle book. So that would be a great example. And then I come up with the outline first before I do any writing because of the impressive statistics on Amazon.com, because of the amount of royalties Amazon gives self-published authors, because you become a recognized authority when you have a book. Because, you get the point? I come up with 3 to 5 because statements. And then under each, I write 1 or 2 paragraphs explaining all the reasons why this point is important. So again, I've got my catchy headline. I've got an opening short story, statement or question. Maybe it's a paragraph or 2 long. I do 1 or 2 paragraphs on each of my because statements. I have a concluding paragraph, blog post. There's a podcast. There's a YouTube video. It really is that simple. And so, to just bring this back home again, there's 3 ways that you can create content. You encourage through stories, you educate through instructional content like how to, and you empower your audience through inspiration, through why. We're being persuasive. Why should I do this? Because of this, because of that, right? Use these and you will have endless amounts of content ideas. Like I said, I've got thousands upon thousands of blog posts. You can go back through all the old blog posts and pick any of them, and you'll find that I've used one of these 3 templates. It really is that simple. So now you know the secret. Hopefully now you will have unleashed that creative genius you have inside of you. Pick your topic, decide if you're going to go with encourage, educate, and empower, and then fill in the outline, create the content. Now I go in more detail of all these templates inside the book. So make sure you grab a copy of Your Message Matters so that you can learn strategies like this to help you rise above the noise and get paid for what you know. Also, don't forget, if you don't know where to start, this is the best place to get started. Go to marketyourmessage.com/discover and you will also be able to figure out who your audience is. You'll be able to learn how you show up best, and you'll be able to define in a single sentence what your message actually is. So go grab that guide today. Well, that's all we have for this edition of the Market Your Message show. What do you think? Was this helpful? If so, why don't you take a moment and like, share, or subscribe? And what topics would you like for us to cover in future episodes? Let us know. But until then, never forget, your message matters.